Hello there, I'm Joe Ruggiero, and welcome to my podcast, Inspired, and the people who inspired me. Well, this morning, I think this guy is going to be very, very interesting. He is a true design renaissance man, and he started from humble beginnings, but he created a journey that is quite impressive. So I want to get right to this Stanley Felderman. And just so happy you're here. But I want to hear a little bit about your childhood in the Bronx.
Okay, a little journey back to my roots. So I was born in the Bronx to a very poor family. My father worked 3 jobs and still didn't make enough money to support us as well. And I used to, and it was an abusive environment. I didn't get a lot of nurturing, but I used to dream about living a better life, and I lived in a tenement, and there was an empty lot next door that I used to fantasize that I was going to build my house of dreams, that this would take me away from my poverty, and that became the foundation of me realizing that design can change people's lives, and that buildings had to have a heart and a spirit. And for me, it was the only nurturing part in my life. And I lived in the Bronx, and one of the things about New York is that they have schools that provide education for any socioeconomic capability. And I went to the High School of Music and Art. It didn't cost
Barbra
anything.
Streisand.
Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it was an amazing environment because you would go up. It was up in the above a park up in Harlem, and you would be surrounded with poverty, but there was this little oasis, and you would go into this building and you would hear people singing and music, and you would look into a studio and people were drawing and painting, and what that did was it elevated me to a place where I felt confident. I felt like people like myself were there. My father, although he was a loving man, could not relate to me as an artist.
Right.
But it was the first time in my life that I felt connected to other people.
Well, it's very funny because of the many people that I've interviewed, all creative. You're the first that has had a hardship in terms of growing up. Most of them lived in happy families and they had a mentor and someone supported them, a grandparent or something in their creative pursuits. So I think it's very interesting because shortly after you left schooling, you did something for Fabergé. Was that your first major?
But that was yes. So so I learned. I was really a good artist. I could draw. I could think something, and I was able to communicate it visually through drawing, through painting, and I learned that from the High School of Music and Art. So, and then I went to Pratt Institute afterwards, and I was hired by a company to do a temporary stint at doing drawings for a company called Fabergé. And it wound up that they questioned me I was in a meeting and they had asked, they saw I wasn't too into it. And they had asked me, what do you think of this design? And I said, well, I think you could do more. So they said, okay, Stanley, come back and show us what you think we could do. So I wound up doing a series of renderings of futuristic offices for the Fabergé Corporation.
Interesting.
And they said, can it be built? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, let's go for it. And I had no idea that it could be built, but I did know that if put to the task, I could certainly do my best. Uh-huh. And it wound up being the first use of fiber optics in the places. I developed a showroom that, because Fabergé is about cosmetics, and cosmetics is very ephemeral. Perfume, for example, you don't see it, but you can smell it. So I said, why don't we create a showroom and this was in the early 70s, like 71 and 70. And I said, what if we did a showroom where nothing existed in real life? So we created a holographic showroom.
Wow.
So it was the first use of holograms. So we created this bottle of perfume that didn't exist, but we infused the environment with the scent of the perfume.
Wow, that.
So that was a clear essence of what perfume
Ahead
was
of
about.
its time.
Ahead of its time. I used cathode lighting, which is at that time equivalent to LEDs today. You know, it was a new, instead of using incandescent lighting, we used cathode. And I used the spectrum of lighting in cathode to create warm and cool light. So I replicated northern light, southern light, and the reason for it is that we wanted to see what does a cosmetic look like in the afternoon versus the morning and so on. So it became a starting off point for rethinking what an office could be. And
Right.
I was in my
or a
early
showroom.
Right.
And
that's right.
speaking of showrooms, you have history with Janice Feldman, and Janice is world known now
Yeah.
as Janice AC, and a very good friend of this program and mine.
Yeah.
And she, how did you work with her? What was your position at that time?
Well, Janice, and I knew Janice when we were all young, and she was married.
Once.
Right. Yeah, and she was married to Bernie Feldman. And and her husband was and she was very involved in the PDC. And
Right,
that was,
the Pacific Design Center.
Yeah, Pacific Design Center. And that was a time when Pacific Design Center was the center of the universe
That
of
is
design.
correct.
And everyone from Chiterio to Frank Gehry to Michael Graves were involved in programs of what was called West Week.
Right.
And
of
West
course,
Week-
which was a very, very big deal in
Yeah.
the 70s.
It was, and it was a time where design had a center. You know, the Pacific Design Center was big enough that it housed all the showrooms,
Right.
and thousands of people would come to the events. And I became, I designed a showroom there for the Gunlock Corporation, and it was a way to take a company with no design profile. Like designers didn't know them; they were mostly represented by end users. So I designed the showroom, and it was an abstraction of what space could be. I played with perspective, I played with scale, and it was a huge success, and it totally changed the position of where Gunlock was and catapulted them to the place where they are today.
Well, you being a visionary, you have designed many, many things. That's why I call you a Renaissance man. Although today you have an architectural firm which is involved in many, many things. You are even a mentor to many students, which I think is fantastic. But I want to talk a little bit about the Sasaki, the tabletop collection that you worked on, because that I think was ahead of its time.
Yeah. So I was hired by Sasaki to come up with a line of china that, and they knew that I would sort of be thinking a little out of the box. They didn't realize how far out of the box I would be thinking. And so I came up with this concept called generation. And it was the idea that we collected china, was dishware, from different generations and history in our own life experience, whether it was your grandparents, great-parents, great-grandparents, and all the pieces, though, fit together. So we created this whole series of Generation 1, Generation 2, and it took us through a journey of different periods of design, and the issue became, how do we sell this? It was one of the first concepts of mix and match.
Right.
It's funny because Swid Powell, who was big at the time, totally did not get it because they would hire architects and designers to design the china, and it was each one created a single story.
Right.
Mine was about all these different stories coming together and mixing, and the idea was that it didn't have to be perfect.
Right.
And in its imperfection, it was perfect.
And that's what we do today anyway when we set a table.
Exactly, right.
I think it makes it a more exciting presentation. Now, you also have had pieces that are at museums, like the Museum of Modern Art and the Whitney. Can you tell us about those pieces?
Yeah, so I was part of the two shows at the Whitney Museum. It was a show called 8 Decades of Hostile Design, and I was in 3 of the decades. And it wasn't only product, but it was also about the spaces. It was the first time that they had recognized Fabergé, and it was the first, it was a stairway that they showed that I did that had screens on the showroom, on the stairway. And remember, this was in 1971, 72, and I had put carousel projectors up in the ceilings, and I wanted to create a multimedia environment.
Right.
And you would have projectors projecting images on these screens on the stair, and you would walk through this multimedia environment. And I'm still doing that today. And I also created this lucite chair that was a takeoff of the Z chair, and it was shown at the Museum of Modern Art. And it was, instead of looking like a solid piece, it too became a very ephemeral piece of furniture. And part of the, and for the Museum of Modern Art exhibition, it was called Work Spheres. And it was a new look at how will people be working in the future.
Absolutely.
And I had just finished the headquarters for MTV Networks, and
right here in California.
in
Santa Monica.
Yes. Yeah, and it was the first use of recycling of materials, and that's if I could just go into this story.
Right, but
really
also creating living environments.
Correct.
My daughter worked for MTV in that facility. And the thing that was interesting is that she would say that she feels very much at home. So you accomplished what you were trying to achieve. But tell me about it.
So MTV Networks, which was part of the exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, I coined the word home away from home. That work was basically your home. We spend sometimes more hours in the day there than we do in our own home. And we coined the phrase casual collision areas, so that the work of the space of the future was about coming together unexpectedly, unplanned, because that's where creativity happens. It happens very often not in a set-up environment, but in the spontaneity of connection.
That's correct.
So the interesting story for that is that we had we would just finish the headquarters. Well, no. What happened was I was invited by Interface Corporation, which is also part of Interface Americas, and they with carpet producers. Ray Anderson was the head, and he was one of the first leaders to want to talk about sustainability. And I was invited to a small conference, and Mikhail Gorbachev was the speaker. And it was just maybe 25 of us at this event. And Mikhail talked about sustainability. He said that we have to be custodians of our future. It was called Global Green. And I think very few people realize that he was one of the innovators for environmental responsibility.
Back then?
Yeah, back in the mid-90s.
Right.
And so I said to, at that time, Nancy Keating, who is now my wife and partner, was my partner at the time, and I said, we need to change the direction that we're going in our work, and we have to be focused on environmental responsibility. So we went to Interface and we said, we want to be part of your team. We have a project coming up called MTV Networks in Santa Monica, and we would like this to be a project that responds to the need to be sustainable and responsible.
Right.
So we became part of their group called One World Learning, and everything that was demolished, it was a renovation of an existing building, and we saved everything. And the glass that was used in the building and the metal that was used in the building, we wound up recycling it and having it part of the new build-out of MTV Networks.
Right.
The concept was so new at the time that we didn't share that with MTV because it was not their goal. So we wound up having it part of the whole scope of work. At the end, they realized what we had done, but we achieved something that really changed the course of where we as designers have wound up going.
Well, now, Nancy, your wife, is the reason that you came to California, right?
Correct.
And you still have offices in New York and California, right?
Yeah, well, our office in New York is teeny. What happened during COVID, we actually were in the process of expanding and opening a new office, and COVID came, and all the work kind of dried up at the time.
Well, the design business has changed because of COVID.
Yeah.
And you have been engaged to work on how to take these design centers and make them more functional. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I think is very, very interesting. Now, one thing that I think is so fascinating about your business is that you have become a lecturer to students. What is it that you think that the design students of today need that you can bring to them?
So I think that in design, you have to make a choice. Do I want to have impact on the world? Because there are designers that where their comfort zone is to be in the middle of the pack.
Right.
So I'm really interested in harnessing the superpower of designers that want to have an impact on the world and that take it really seriously and know that their life is a journey and it's not always about the immediate career and how much money I'm making now and what are my benefits in this employment, that I talk about the concept of taking risk.
Right.
That if your goal is to be a designer, an architect, a creator, that you need to focus on what can I do today that would take me to where I want to go in the future. And trust in yourself that you may not get response to what your vision is today, but what happens is if you stay steadfast to your beliefs and hone your capabilities, like learn your craft, whether you work on a computer, whether you draw by hand, whether you sculpt work, whatever it is, hone your craft and use it to communicate your ideas, stay with it long enough that, very much like in the entertainment industry, that you don't give up until there's no, until you don't have any place else to go.
Right.
Trust in yourself.
Right.
And if you follow your heart and if you follow your beliefs, the success and the money will come. And success is always, and for myself, I'll say it, that when I feel nurtured by what I did,
right,
that's success.
Well, but you had intuitive design abilities, and you also had resourcefulness. And I can remember my first real job in the design industry, because I came from the communications industry, was with Nat Ansel, and he was the head of Ethan Allen. And he said to me once, I could teach you a lot, but I don't have the time. I could remember that very well. But he said, if you think about dollars and the money that you're going to get, forget about that. You have to trust in yourself and your talents to follow your vision. And I jumped a lot of hurdles in my life, as you did as well, but I finally got to where I wanted to be. And I think a lot of people don't have that, what they get frustrated. You know what I'm saying? And they say, I'll take this job, or, it's any job. And then they're unhappy. It's better to be happy in what you do, don't you believe?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I had it, going back to Fabergé, that I had a regular job, 9 to 5. I was drawing, I was happy. And then I was asked to do some drawings on a project that would only last maybe 6 months the most. So I quit my job that I had to do this because I really wanted to be part of something really interesting. And that was the life-changing event. It was a crossroads. I could have stayed in security and safety.
Right.
But I took the risk, and I was rewarded because I took the risk.
But not everyone has that, I mean, I think that it took a long time for me to go into business for myself because I didn't have the wherewithal. And if it wasn't for two big corporations to fund my way, and they made me do things in terms of developing products and whatever, I would never have been able to do it. But I also had a companion, my wife, who encouraged me. And a lot of women don't do that. They want to stay with their family or they don't want to move and, oh no, that's too much of a risk. And I think that that's such a great thing to have that. And I think you had that in yourself. And I don't know how you nurtured that or where it came from. What was the fuel to the furnace?
Well, I think, Nancy coming into my life was a true blessing. Mm-hmm. She came into my life also in a period where I was very insecure about where I was going. Life is not a straight line. It's a journey, and how we have our ups and downs. And she met me at a period where I was losing confidence. I was not in my best place. But she had the confidence in me that I didn't have. And I was living in New York at the time, and we fell in love. And instead of moving to New York to be with me, I said, and I had clients that were in the entertainment industry. I had, was doing work for Disney, Universal. I was doing all these entertainment companies. I had headquarters in New York, but also had facilities here. And I said, I'm going to move to California.
Yeah.
So I moved to California. It was the best thing I could have done. And we're now married 33 years. So
newlyweds.
We're newlyweds, right? And still in love. And she continues to be a central part in my creative process.
Well, what do you think about the environment on the West Coast? I found it to be very creative, and I know that we have our problems, but coming from New York, and I'm a New Yorker too, I found it was the promised land. I don't know. I just felt that way.
I didn't feel that at first, because I would fly back and forth. Hugh Hefner was one of my clients, and I had really good
with the Playboy
yeah,
organization, yeah.
And but I didn't find the West Coast compelling. It was kind of too flat and too open. Growing up in New York, I love the the narrowness of the streets, the tall building, the grid. So I couldn't relate to this, and everything was kind of new here, and I also felt that the desire to have high design and actually be willing to pay for it was not there. In New York, budgets were always higher. The level of the bar was raised higher. So back in the 80s when I first came here, it was a different playing field. We didn't have the number of high-end restaurants like we have now.
Right.
We didn't have nouveau cuisine. So.
Well, I always like to imagine when I had friends from New York come out to visit. New Yorkers have an attitude.
Right, yeah.
And they have an ego. And nothing is as good as New York. Mm-hmm. And I found, because the Sunbrella company, of which I do fabrics for, they hired me to go out and lecture to designers all over the USA and Canada. And I found that there was talent everywhere, and there was sophistication everywhere. In every state, they offer something. And I think that it really sort of dispelled that New Yorker ego of mine. And there are other places in the United States and the world, obviously the world, because that's where we get a lot of the influence from. Have you done a lot of traveling?
Yes, we used to travel a lot. We were actually hired by Interface to travel around the world and connect the dots, like what kind of part of the environmental initiative of them was to have companies co-create product that spoke to each other so that we could create longevity in the product life and that different product interface with each other. So we used to travel around the world a lot and meet with heads of companies from 3M and we would look at what kind of new products could we find. And part of my traveling was back early. We found this Bluetooth in Europe, and we said, "Oh my God, this is amazing! It's about connecting things."
Right.
So we came back to the States and we talked about Bluetooth, and we tried to get it part of the world. Integrated into the world and
New technologies.
Yeah, right.
So, and you were really ahead of your time with your Fabergé installation.
Correct. Yeah.
With the holograms and what have you, which I think is a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to slow down a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe you're moving too fast because everybody's catching up to you now.
Yeah.
Which I think is very, very interesting.
One of the things for us, and I think that I don't want. This was an important aspect of our lives because we became parents later on in life, that we decided that we weren't going to have children that weren't part of our lives. So part of the traveling around the world was we would tell different companies that we'll go visit them, but we have to bring our kids. So even before they were 1 year old, they would go to conferences with us.
Wonderful.
And as a result, we have kids that are immersed in the arts. They're not designers. One is an artist and the other's a jeweler.
Right.
And they're enormously creative. And they were born, whether it was genetic with capabilities, but they lived a life where they really were integrated into their parents' lives. They never felt less than because we always looked at them with awe that their journey was just beginning, and we instilled what I didn't get from my parents was where my father never told me he liked what I was doing. We always talk to our kids and tell them, how great they are and what their future ahead is lies.
Encourage that.
So we encourage them. So I really feel that we're here to be creative for a purpose, whether it's to influence our immediate family or the whole world in general.
Right.
But we have to be conscious about giving it away. That when we covet our creativity and it becomes very self-centered, it doesn't allow for others to be part of that journey, and you don't allow them to take what your ideas are and elevate it in their way. And when you talked earlier about being a mentor for students or others aspiring to be creatives, is that I encourage them to find their own vocabulary. I'm finding that in schools, and we ran into this with both our kids because they went into college with a lot of ability, and the professors instilled on them their own narrow vision.
Exactly.
And it was a battle for them because they were not being listened to.
Right.
I would love to address schools that they have to be broader, that if we're going to grow, that the teacher has to be teachable, that they need to elevate the students to discover who they are.
Discovery.
Yeah.
So important. And I can remember my daughter, speaking of your children, when she was in college, she was sort of confused. And when she graduated, she didn't know where to go. And a friend of hers said, work for your father because you will travel all over the world. And I didn't even know I was going to be traveling all over the world. So for 8 years, She admits today that it was graduate school because it opened her eyes and discover what is out there. And I think that is very, very important, a wonderful point that you brought up.
Yeah, and I found that with our own daughter, that who had such confidence and a vision of where she was going and a passion, that when she graduated at college, it took her almost a year to rediscover herself, that she was in many ways discouraged to follow her vision because it didn't fit the package or the box that her professors at school wanted. And I could just say that hold on to your beliefs, even if you don't know enough about it, like just being willing to stay true to yourself.
Well, in today's world, there's internships, which we never ever had. I would go into an interview and they said, well, what's your experience? And I would have to say none. But, I'm willing to work and I'm willing to learn. And I did have a professor who always said, you can steal as much with your eyes. Don't worry about the salary. Just be aware of your environment. And I think that was very, very good advice. And I can remember walking into a designer's home, and over the mantle, he had a quote from Tennyson, "Follow your gleam," which I think is such good advice.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny because when I just finished the headquarters for Fabergé, back then we didn't have we had phone books. And
Rolodexes.
And Rolodexes. And one of the things that I wanted to do, a good friend of mine as well, we wanted to connect with architects and designers that we really respected. So I was up in New Canaan, Connecticut, and Philip Johnson lived there, and I looked up in the phone book his number, and I called and we were in a gas station down the block from him, and we called him. And we said, and he actually answered the phone, and I got really nervous.
Wow.
And I said, I can't believe it's here. And I said, we'd love to come and visit you at your house in New Canaan. He said,
the Glass House.
The Glass House.
Yeah.
He said, oh, absolutely, sure. And I said, we recently got out of school and just finished a project and so on. And he said, sure, when would you like to come? And I said, well, I'm just down the block from you.
How about immediately?
Yeah. So I went and visited him. And we toured the Glass House, and we saw his little museum and everything, and he talked about what he was doing. He said, what have you done? And I said, well, I just finished the offices for Fabergé. And he said, oh, my God, I know that project. He said, you are starting your career with what most people end their career with.
Wow.
And that gave me, that was the spark plug that allowed me to truly and wholly believe that I had a vision that was worth putting all my energy into.
That was the encouragement.
That was the encouragement. Like, how would this person know what I did? Because here's this kid from the Bronx who nobody knew, had no money, who, in my own mind, was invisible.
Right.
And suddenly I realized, what I do is not invisible.
Right.
But people will see it, and I will have impact. And that was the single event in my life that was allowed me gave me my superpower.
Right. Well, see, you have the ability, which you don't admit, but my dad was a very, very good salesman, and he said the most difficult thing is to sell something that's not tangible, and you have that ability to pitch. So I don't know where that came from. Did you just invent that, or
no? So one of the things we talked earlier, that I'm looked at as a futurist for whatever reason. Part of the idea that I kind of want to reinvent my environment,
right,
is that I have to look to the future. So I have a really good ability to connect the dots, and part of the idea of the holographic showroom, different things like that, are part of that. I got involved in NFTs early on, which turned out kind of to be a bust. but at the time it was kind of the new.
Now explain NFTs.
Non-fungible tokens. That's where you would create something that would be on the blockchain, and you would own the digital rights to something, and
right.
it would be permanently recorded, and you would have ownership of this in perpetuity.
Uh-huh.
So, but what it did was it actually elevated the idea that digital art had a value. Today we're looking at AI technology.
Right.
Where's that going to
Back
take
then.
us? Yeah, and we had worked on with a company back like 7 years ago that was developing AI technology, and it was a little too early, and it was.
Let my listeners know what your firm is involved with now, because I think it's fascinating, and the name of your firm.
Oh, well, the name of the firm is Felderman, Keating and Associates, and we're based in Los Angeles, as Joe mentioned. But we have a broad reach, and we'll do work. We've done work in China, in Korea, in Japan. So we'll do work in Europe. We'll do work wherever needed. And the kind of work we're doing now is when we're working on a luxury showroom for high-end cars.
Wow.
And we're creating what it is it's a social hub where people come together that have a common passion, which are fast and expensive cars. And in one area, if you like to smoke a cigar, you'll be able to go, smoke a cigar, eat, just have events.
Right.
And we're working on a restaurant down in Orange County. And
what's the concept for the restaurant?
Well, the concept, it's a dim sum restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And the idea is that you know what dim sum is.
Right,
you
plates,
pick and choose. Right.
small, like
Yeah.
a tapas,
Right.
Chinese
Yeah.
style.
Yeah. But what's really exciting for us is that we've come up with a new product that is responsive to the workplace of the future.
Uh-huh.
Now, the workplace of the future is not only the office, but it could be a hotel you're staying in,
Right.
or it could be your backyard, or it could be, it could be in your office. So we have this product, we call it Nomad, and it's a series of elements from seating to art to wall panels to a desking area that seamlessly come together, that are flexible, that create hubs within spaces that you can have touchdown space and create privacy. And so that's one of the things we're doing now as well.
That's the thing that I think is so interesting about design and vision, is that you can go, I'm surprised you aren't a producer of motion pictures, because you're a very visual guy.
Yeah.
And I try to encourage students to say, this may not be exactly what you were thinking of, but with your talent, you can take it anywhere. And I think that's what you've done. Now, I'm going to mention one thing before we have to close, and that is because I get my guests' recommendations from various people that I respect or who inspire me. And you met Allison Taylor, and you met her at a swap meet or something. But how did you connect?
Well, so I believe you have to give it away to get things back. So we were getting rid of a lot of stuff that we owned, and I had this table from Japan, little round table that she liked, and we just started talking, and she wound up buying this table, and then she sent me a picture of what it looked like in her house, and I said, God, this woman is really unique, that
Right.
not only did she get something, but she wanted me to see its new home. So we've just been connecting,
And she's a fashionista too.
she's a
I
fashionista.
mean, she mixed and matched.
Had a great style. There are certain people, I call it dominion, where you don't have to say anything or do anything. You know that they're there.
Right.
And she's one of those people. She has the look and the attitude and kind of a vibration that you want to be part of.
Right. And I really respect you in that And I'm so happy we had this time to chat because you create these environments, not only to make people feel at home, but feel comfortable, but stimulate. And stimulation is such a very, very important part of we creative people. And I can't thank you enough, Stanley. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, and it's very, very hot outside. No one's going anywhere, but I thank you for coming here and joining us.
My pleasure. You know, one of the things I just want to end with is that
please.
My latest focus has been my art. And this is really important to me because I've used art as the thread throughout projects. I've been hired by Disney, every company to do art for them. So this is the first time where I'm taking my art and letting it live on its own.
Wow.
And I've created a whole body of my work that I'm going to be putting out to the world in this next year.
And what medium?
From anything from acrylic painting to three-dimensional pieces to digital photography.
Wow.
And I have thousands of pieces of art that I've done in my journey that for the first time I'm putting it out there in the world because I want people to see it.
And is there a website that we can all see?
No, well, I have my Instagram where if you go through I do a lot of service work that I put on my Instagram, but I will have a website very shortly.
Oh, good.
And it'll be open for the world to see. And that is like the single most important thing today in my career.
Terrific. You've achieved that goal. Well, that's marvelous. Thank you. Good luck. I can't wait to see it. And I appreciate you taking this time.
My pleasure.